I would like to thank the Pourdavoud Center for the study of the Iranian world, and in particular, Professor Chaim Shayegan for his kind invitation to speak today, as well as Dr. Marisa Stevens for the organization of this event. During the last 20 years, Avestan studies have seen major progress in our understanding of the Avestan corpus. And I have been very lucky to see that from the inside, by working with scholars such as Jean Kellens, Alberto Cantera, or Almut Hinze. Today, I will try to summarize the progress made and how it has shaped the current research on the Avesta. My talk consists of 3 parts: the Avesta, its history, its transmission, its content; the Yasna as a ritual performance; and finally, the new editions of the Avesta. The first part is based on the recently published book, co-written with Jean Kellens and entitled Introduction à l'Avesta, le récitatif liturgique sacré des Zoroastriens. In this book, containing 6 chapters, our aim was to provide a clear summary of the state of research in Avestan studies, and especially of the Avesta itself. Besides the hard copy, it is also possible to read it online in open access. The Avesta refers to the oldest part of the corpus of Zoroastrian text. The term Avesta comes from the Middle Persian word abastag, which can be understood as upastavaka, the text beginning with a praise. Abestag appears in the expression Abestag utzond, the Avesta and its interpretation, where Avesta must refer to the collection of text written in Avestan. Its transmission deserves some attention. The Avesta has been preserved over centuries through oral transmission and then also through written transmission. The following timeline can be given. Composition around the first millennium before the Common Era or even before. Fixation of the corpus during the Achaemenid period around the 6th century before the Common Era. However, the corpus has been put into writing only a millennium later in the 5th-6th centuries Common Era, and the oldest manuscript preserved dates back only to the 13th century. Hence, there is around 2 millennia between the composition and the oldest written testimony. One specificity is that, unlike other ancient text corpora, the Avesta has never been discovered because it has never been lost, properly speaking. So, when did the Avesta become known in Europe, and how has it been perceived since? The Avesta became known in Europe in the 18th century when Abraham Hyacinthe Anctil Duperron came back from India with a collection of manuscripts and made a first full translation into French. The 19th century has been impressive and could be called the century of editions, as we count 3 editions of the Avesta. Friedrich Spiegel published one between 1852 and 1858, Niels Ludwig Westergaard one in 1852, and Friedrich Geldner a little bit later, another one between 1885 and 1895. Geldner's edition has been used by scholars for over a century and is still used nowadays, as no complete edition has been published since then. When looking at his edition, it gives the impression that the Avesta is constituted of 4 books: the Yasna, sacrifice; the Visperad, all the periods; the Rorde Avesta, small Avesta, containing among other texts the well-known Yasht; the Videvdat, also called Vendidat, the prescription to keep the demons away. Geldner assumed that these 4 books are the incertain debris of a former great Avesta canonized during the Sassanid period. This conception prevailed during the last century, as it can be clearly seen, for example, in Bailey's quotation from 1943. I quote, "Our present Avestan texts go back to an edition after the fall of the Sasanian Empire of the fragments saved from the first edition of about the middle of the 6th century. End of quotation. The last 2 decades have seen this vision deeply challenged. It has not been an overturning, but a slow and continuous opening to new perspectives that can be summarized in 4 steps. First, in 1998, Jean Kellens published an article, Considérations sur l'histoire de l'Avesta, where he shows that the Avesta is a collection of 2 liturgical ontologies constituted before the Sasanian Avesta. First, the long liturgy, and second, the short liturgies, Chorda Avesta, with the Yasht. These 2 ontologies are internally coherent and not constituted of fragments imperfectly arranged. This allowed to work again on the structure of the text, starting with the ceremonies of the long liturgy. The long liturgy is constituted of 6 ceremonies: the Yasna ceremony, the Yasna Irapisvin ceremony, an abbreviated version of the Yasna only performed in the summer at noon during the Rapisvinga, from which it derives its name. The Visperad, a solemn ceremony for major festivities, especially the Gaumbar, performed in the morning. The Do Omast ceremony, a variant of the Visperad ceremony, in which 2 Omasts are performed. This ceremony is described in manuscript 2000. The Videvdat ceremony is performed during the night at the Oshainga, as it is the 6th one, the Vishtaspyash ceremony, attested only in the manuscript, as it is not performed anymore. The common feature of all these ceremonies is that they contain the text of the Yasna at their core. The structure of these ceremonies is worth mentioning because it has not been reproduced in the editions, and one needs to consult a liturgical manuscript to see it. The table here provides a simplified structure. The Visperad ceremony alternates the text of the Yasna with the ones of the Visperad. The 24 chapters of the Visperad are used only as intercalated text within the Yasna and are not autonomous. As I said, this table is a simplified version because in addition to the insertion of the 24 chapters, various further small adjustments are made to transform the Yasna into a Visperad. In his work on the Visperad ceremony, Alberto Cantera added the siglum VRS, corresponding to Visperad Sade, to identify the remaining portion of text. This leads to a complex table where 3 levels are intertwined. First, the Yasna text, then the chapters of the Visperad in green, and finally the Visperad Sade portion in red. To avoid such a numbering not easy to follow, a new system has been defined for the new edition of the Visperad, with the chapter stanza numbers always preceded by the siglum VRS. The Visperad ceremony acts as a basis for the ceremonies of intercalation, where texts are intercalated within the old Avestan section of the Yasna, namely between Yasna 27 and Yasna 55. 2 ceremonies of this kind are attested in the manuscripts, the Videvdat and the Vishtaspyasht. It was long believed that these ceremonies were relatively recent creations. However, in the last years, it has become clear that the arrangement of these ceremonies demonstrate a real knowledge of the content of the Yasna and its Avestan texts. In 2007, Prof. Dr. Scherve published an inspiring article about the structure of the Videvdat. I quote, "The myths that underlie the Videvdat go from Ahura Mazda's arrangement of the order world of the living to the final healing of the entire cosmos. Within these framing stories, issues of pollution and purification are discussed." End of quotation. The discussion was initiated. Then, in 2013, Alberto Cantera proposed an explanation leading to the order of the 22 chapters of the Videvdat. Ahura Mazda created the word pure. It then became contaminated through the attack of Enramanyu and affected by sickness and death. A first attempt at purification was performed by the mythical king Yima, but without complete success. Accordingly, the world was heavily contaminated with Nasu. The first successful means of purification is the Barshnom ceremony. From this point on, the subject is no longer Nasu, but the world is still afflicted by minor impurities, that is, excrements, secretions, hair, and nails. The final process of purification begins with Srōša and the priestly activity during the night and culminates in the encounter of Zarathustra with Ahura Mazda, which leads to the final healing of the world by Ahriman. The text has two goals. The first one is to provide clear explanation on ritual matters, and the second is to tell a story. This story goes with the aim of a Videvdat ceremony, a rite of purification and of exclusion of evil forces from the world. Furthermore, one text must be mentioned, the Nerangestan. The term Nerang means here ritual direction. Hence, this text is full of technical directions for the use of priests carrying out their ritual duties. It is written in Avestan and in Middle Persian. The recent edition, accompanied by an annotated translation by Dastur Kodval and Philippe Krayenbrück, makes the text more accessible. The Nerangestan is full of useful information, and I will now provide one fact related to our current discussion. The Yasht are as such part of the Rorde Avesta, the collection of short liturgies. However, in the recent years, it has been shown that they could have played the same role as the Videvdat or the Vishtaspyasht, by being intercalated within the old Avestan corpus. Such an arrangement has not been recorded in the manuscripts, but traces of such a ceremony are found in some texts, like the Visperad or the Nerangestan. This fact has been first pointed out by Philippe Krayenbrück in 2004 and then in 2008. Subsequently, Alberto Cantera has shed some new light on the manuscripts themselves and rendered many of them available online on the Avestan Digital Archive. The website provides access to more than 100 manuscripts that have been indexed, and thus it is now possible to look for a specific folio or a specific passage, as shown here on the slide. By working directly on the manuscripts, Alberto Cantera showed that a new edition of the Avesta was needed. Why did he reach such a conclusion? The manuscripts can be classified into two main categories, the exegetical and the liturgical manuscripts. The main aim of the exegetical manuscripts is to contribute to the understanding of the Avestan text, for which a Middle Persian Pahlavi translation is provided. It is a kind of bilingual text to help the learned priest understand the meaning of the original text. The liturgical manuscripts, also called Sadeh, are used for ritual purposes. They contain just the Avestan text, together with ritual directions, indicating what should be done by the priest while reciting the text. Liturgical manuscripts written in Iran have ritual directions in Middle Persian, while the ones written in India have ritual direction in Gujarati written in a specific kind of Nagari script. All previous editions of the Avesta are based on exegetical manuscripts, which split the corpus in books and do not reproduce a ritual use. However, as the Avestan texts have been composed to be part of rituals, they should be edited based on the liturgical manuscripts, in accordance with their primary purpose. Third, between 2008 and 2012, it has been shown that the liturgies were not only coherent, but also ancient, their compositional structure being attested in the Avestan texts themselves. Assembling the information about the ceremonies described in Yasna 57, stanza 2-8 and 19-26, and Yash 10, 88-94, allows to provide the structure displayed here. By adding Adorknask 2.13, we can include the final part. By doing so, Kellens showed that the épine dorsale, the backbone of the Yasna, dates to a period when Avestan texts were still being composed. To this can be added the comparison with the Indian ritual, more especially the 5th day of the Agnishtoma, made by Xavier Tremblay. He put forth a similar structure, which can hardly be pure chance, and pleads again for an ancient rite. Fourth, from 2012 onwards, it has become apparent that the two types of liturgies, long liturgy and short liturgies, were not mutually independent, and that combinations were possible to form further types of ceremonies. The diagram displayed here tries to provide a visual explanation of this complex situation. Although it is not possible to explain everything, I will try to give some concrete examples. The case of the intercalation of the Yasht has already been mentioned, and so it is not only pertaining to the short liturgies. A similar account has been given for the Adorknask. This text has reached us only in its exegetical transmission. Regarding its liturgical usage, it's now thought that its first chapter was intercalated after Yasna 27, and the second, famous for its narration of what happens after death, after Yasna 51. This Adorknask liturgy, now defunct, may have previously been used in a funerary rite. The Drōn Yasht, literally the bread sacrifice, referred to as Bajdarna, holding the badge in India, occupies a specific position. It is absent from the available editions of the Avesta, certainly due to its similarity to Yasna 3-8, which must have led earlier scholars to regard it as a simple variant. The text of the Drōn Yasht does not display any otherwise unknown Avestan term, if I may say so, but it is very interesting on the structural and ritual level. This gap has recently been filled with the edition of Ramiyar Karanjia, and since then the text has made the object of a few articles. By directly working on the manuscripts, some ceremonies have been added, as for example the Drōn Fravardin Yasht in honor of a dead, and constituted of a Drōn Yasht, followed by the recitation of Yasht 13, dedicated to the Fravashi, as discovered in 2015 by Miguel Ángel Andrés Toledo. With these few examples, we do see that the split into two main types of liturgies does not cover all the Avestan texts, and that the corpus cannot only be divided into two sets. Instead, it seems more accurate to speak about three categories: the ritual text, the meta-ritual literature, and the Avestan quotations. The ritual texts written in Avestan are used in rituals. Among them, some are still performed nowadays, and some are only attested in the manuscripts, as we have seen with the Vishtaspyasht. The first set is the one of the long liturgy. Then we have the text of the Horda Avesta. To this must be added a certain number of ritual texts that did not pertain to these two sets in the previous edition, like the Drōn Yasht or the Adorknask. The second category, the meta-ritual literature, is mainly represented by the Narangestan, the Book of Ritual Directions. As we have seen earlier, this text provides information on the ritual and is a bilingual text, Avestan and Middle Persian. The slide provides an example of a Middle Persian commentary. For the Srōš Drōn, one should put the drone and gushadag in place. There is no need for the frasast, and one should place 3 pieces of firewood and incense on the right-hand side. This direction stresses a ritual difference between the bread used for a Yasna ceremony, namely a drōn, a flat bread having 9 marks, and the bread used for a drōn ceremony, namely a frasast, a flat bread without any mark. Nowadays, the gushadag refers to the clarified butter placed in the middle of the flat bread. While partaking the bread, as we will see later, the priest dips a piece of bread into the clarified butter before ritually consuming it. The third category of Avestan text are quotations. Avestan is used in text written in another language, usually in Middle Persian or New Persian, to exemplify something or provide an anchor to the old tradition. Here is an example taken from the Middle Persian text Pursishnia, questions. Is it proper to perform the Rwachet Nya'ishn while traveling on the back of the beast or not? If one is in danger, it is so proper to perform even when he stands or sits or has lied down or is riding with the ox goad or is on the back of the beast and the beast is going along, if he retains the sacred sword and the girdle. From the Avesta, it is evident. Standing or sitting or lying or riding or driving, if one is girdled, then it gratifies the Ratu, ritual prototypes. The Avestan quotation is not attested elsewhere in the text. The second extract is taken from the Rivayat, referring to the exchange between Iranian priest and Parsi from the 15th to the 18th century. They are written in New Persian. As they deal with ritual questions, they often cite Avestan texts. Here, for example, the text says, the barsom, an important ritual implement, should be made from the tree, but it should not be made of metal. As it is said in the Avesta, Yoi urvaram baresma frasterenti amo veresajem puru fravakshem, meaning, if they spread a baresman made from trees with the same stalk and many branches. The extract points out an interesting fact about the twigs. Metallic wires started to be used during the period of the Persian Rivayat, replacing the twigs. It is difficult to establish a date for this replacement in India, but it probably happened because pomegranate or tamarisk trees were not available in the area. The substitution is evident in some manuscripts where the rites for tying up the bundle with twigs or metallic wires are different. To summarize, the Avesta is not seen anymore as a fragment, and there is no doubt about its ritual function. After a century focused more on the linguistics aspects of the Avestan corpus, the current research focuses more on the ritual one, which is responsible for the structure of the text. The Études Avestiques et Mazdéennes 1-5, written by Jean Kellens, are the fruit of this renewal. His work is the first attempt to read the complete text of the liturgy, the Yasna with the Visperad, as the current text of an old and meaningful liturgy. The chapters within the Yasna do not follow a chronological order of composition, but a significative ritual one. The ancient editors who arranged the Yasna took text from different periods to create a cohesive liturgical recitative. On the language level, the Old Avestan texts are surrounded by Middle Avestan texts, and the whole is wrapped up by Young Avestan texts. The idea of Middle Avestan is relatively recent, as it has been brought to light by Xavier Tremblay in 2003. On the structural level, there is the central core preceded by an introduction and followed by a conclusion. The introduction runs from Yasna 1 to 21, and during this part, the priest builds his ritual personality, so to speak. Two main actions happen: the partaking of the bread in Yasna 8:4 and the ingestion of Auma in Yasna 11:11. The second part, from Yasna 22 to 55, contains 2 rounds of pressing the sacred plant Auma, first during Yasna 22 to 27 and second during 31 to 33. Furthermore, a meat offering formally took place during the Yasna Aptangaiti in Yasna 36. The last part, from 56 to 72, contains 2 main sections. the litany to the fire, Yasna 62, and the libation to the waters from 63 to 69. For a very detailed explanation and all the intricacies I cannot comment today, there is a recent article, Litanies and Rituals, acting like a small book due to its length, by Alberto Cantera. When I was a student, I studied Avestan mainly for the language itself and found it quite difficult to see how the text fit within a ritual context. My way of understanding Avestan has considerably changed since then. And now I am in fact impressed by the relation between the Avestan text and the performance. As we have seen in the introductory part of the Yasna, the priest prepares himself for the sacrifice, and among these operations, he partakes of the drawn bread in Yasna 8.4. This is foreshadowed in Yasna 8.2, where the Avestan text states very clearly, "Eat, O men, this ritual meal, you who have won it through order and advancement." The Avestan sentence clearly explains a performative action that will happen in Yasna 8.4. However, in Yasna 8.4, properly speaking, the Avestan text does not explain the action. This leads me to the second part of this talk, dealing with the Yasna as a performance and the ritual directions. Except Darmesteter, at the end of the 19th century, who included in his French translation of the Yasna a translation of Middle Persian and Gujarati Ritual Directions, the ritual directions have not been edited so far, nor have they appeared in most recent translations. To provide a concrete example of their close connection with the Avestan text and why they should be included in an edition, we will look at Yasna 8.4. Yasna 8.4 can be divided in 4 parts. First, a sentence stating that the one not prepared to utter sacred words deserves to be punished. And then the recitation of 2 sets of Hashem Vau formula and the Yauna Vairya. If we add to this the ritual directions, we see that the first time the Hashem Vau should be recited 3 times, while the second time it is 4 times. And finally, 2 Yauna Vairya should be recited. In the manuscripts, only the first recitation is accompanied by a gestural ritual direction, describing specific actions that the priest should perform. This ritual direction runs as follows, according to the manuscript referred to as number 5. The partaker should recite 3 Hashem Vau, raise a hand from the bundle, cover the end of the libation, eat the Srōš bread and cleanse his mouth, and wash his hand with ritual ablution, and put his hand over the bundle. As seen on the slide, the ritual direction is written in Middle Persian, and to mark the difference with the Avestan text, it is in red. It's not always the case, but we do see the tendency in the manuscripts to write the directions in red. A similar indication appears in this ritual direction written in Gujarati. As Avestan is written from right to left and Gujarati from left to write the text in the same direction, Gujarati is written upside down, which means we need to rotate the page by 180 degrees to be able to read. Further, we must start at the bottom of the portion of text and go up. In this manuscript dating back to the 16th century, the text says, "At this point, after reciting 3 Hashem Vau, the chief priest lifts the hand from the bundle. The assistant priest gives the bread in the chief priest's right hand. The chief priest partakes the bread, finishes it. After the mouth is empty and the taste has gone, taking the bowl from the top of the water container, he purifies his left hand. Again, purifying his left hand inside the water container, he puts his left hand on the bundle on top of the moon-shaped stance. The chief priest releases the badge." We note that the Gujarati description provides more details than the Middle Persian one. Other examples may show a difference between the Indian and the Iranian ritual practice, as for example in Yasna 8.2. We have seen that Yasna 8.2 introducing the partaking of the bread, and as indicated in the ritual directions, this sentence should be recited by the assistant priest, who must take his place next to the chief priest. Manuscript 5 writes Chaspig Padga Yavanan. The assistant priest should go to the place of the Avanan priest. The Iranian manuscripts indicate the place by referring to the position of specific priests, a priest called Avanan and one called Frabardar. To solve this small riddle, we should look at a diagram provided in some manuscripts and displaying the position of the priest on the ritual area. For example, in manuscript 4000, the ritual area is drawn with indication of the position of the 8 priests. You may wonder why there are 8 priests if a Yasna ceremony is performed by 2 priests only. The reason is that for a Visperad or Videvdat ceremony, originally 8 priests were needed. And over time, it has been reduced to 2 priests, the chief priest, the Zod, and the assistant priest, the Raspig. From this diagram, we can see that in Yasna 8.2, the assistant priest should go to the right side of the chief priest at the place originally assigned to the Avanan priest. However, if we read the Gujarati Ritual Directions, it appears that the assistant priest stands on the chief priest's left side while reciting Eat, O men, this ritual meal. Thus, there is an evolution within the Indian tradition for the priest's position, even if the Avestan text remains identical. Manuscript 420 and 457 have a Middle Persian direction indicating the Indian position, probably because they have been written in India. The work on the ritual directions is still quite new, and it has started with the Middle Persian ritual directions. One of the difficulties we face with the ritual directions is the fact that their text is not fixed, as it is the case with the Avestan texts. And thus, there is huge variation between manuscripts. The variation does not necessarily imply a different meaning, but it complicates the way of editing the ritual directions. The ritual directions for the ceremonies of the long liturgy are available on the website of the CAP project, based in Berlin and directed by Alberto Cantera. For each ceremony, the ritual directions are displayed in red, and by clicking on it, a window box provides the translation and the information from which manuscript it comes. On my side, I have worked on a specific portion of the Yasna, chapters 3 to 8, and in my last book, I dedicated a chapter on the ritual directions, providing their text and translation from 30 manuscripts. When it comes to Gujarati ritual directions, one book is famous, Yasna Banirang, by Termuraz Dinshau Anklesarya. It has been published 3 times, and it provides a complete text of the Paragnā, the preparatory ceremony to hold high liturgies, the Yasna, the Visperad, and the Yasna Irapizvin ceremonies. The recitation text of the first edition, based on the edition of Vestergaard, is given in the Avestan script, and the ritual directions are presented in the Gujarati script and language. Anklesarya had completed the manuscript of his 1888 edition by the time the first volume of Gellner's edition of the Avesta appeared in 1886. But he does provide a list of Gellner's variant at the end of the 1888 edition. In the second edition, in 1926, some Gujarati spelling mistakes have been corrected. The third edition was published in 1957, with the text of the second edition reprinted and preceded by a valuable introduction by Dastur Ormazdiar Mirza. Since the publication of the first edition, Anklesarya's work has remained the standard textbook for the training of the Russian priestly students in India. Thus, the 2 principal priestly training schools, the Dada Atornan Institute and the Kama Atornan Institute, both located in Mumbai, have been using Anklesarya's edition as a basis for teaching the recitation and performance of the Yasna and Visperad ceremonies to students. While this book is fundamental, it has unfortunately not often been used by scholars due to their common lack of knowledge of Gujarati. To fill this gap, Kerman Daruwalla and I worked on a transcription of Anklesarya's text, followed by an English translation, leading to the publication of the Gujarati Ritual Directions of the Paragnā, Yasna and Visperad ceremonies. Here is an example from the Paragnā, the preparatory ceremony, when the assistant priest milks the goat. The text is transcribed and long sentences are split into shorter units to help the reader to match the translation with the original text. With the same aim, we preferred a literal translation over a free one. Furthermore, the book includes a complete glossary of the Gujarati text of the Paragnā and the Yasna. Our aim was to provide all the information needed by the reader to understand our translation and to gain some knowledge in this difficult language. Having a better access to Anklesarya is the first step to work on the Gujarati Ritual Directions, but there is still a lot to be discovered. For a better picture of the Gujarati Ritual Directions, the future work should consider two things. First, Anklesarya is not the only printed edition of the Yasna with Ritual Directions. We listed 15 other printed editions of the Yasna and Visperad Ceremonies, and among them, 7 appeared before Anklesarya. Second, the information from the manuscripts. While working on Anklesarya's translation, we wondered to what extent Anklesarya's edition represents a faithful continuation of the manuscript tradition, and how reliable it is as a reference work for academic research on the rituals the book describes. Hence, we compared Anklesarya's ritual directions with that of 5 manuscripts of the Yasna India liturgical manuscripts by focusing on chapters 3 to 8 of the Yasna ceremony. The first difference to be stressed between Anklesarya and the manuscripts concerns the script. Anklesarya uses the Gujarati script, while the manuscripts use a specific kind of Nagari classified as the Parsi Nagari script. Out of a total of 34 occurrences of ritual direction in Yasnas 3 to 8 in the manuscripts, Anklesarya provides indication for 27, which correspond to nearly 80%. We can classify ritual directions in 2 categories: gestural ritual directions, describing specific action to priest, and non-gestural ritual directions, referring to the person in charge of the recitation or the number of times a particular prayer is to be recited. If we look only at the gestural ritual directions, there is a high degree of agreement between the manuscripts and Anklesarya. On the linguistic level, the vocabulary and the syntax are very similar, although the spelling of words fluctuates. In addition, however, there are some words attested in the manuscripts which are absent from Anklesarya. Regarding the connection between the ritual directions in Middle Persian and in Gujarati, the fact that the syntax differs significantly makes it unlikely that the ritual directions have at some point been translated word by word from Middle Persian to Gujarati. In Gujarati, the ritual directions are usually longer than in Middle Persian. This phenomenon is unsurprising if the manuscripts containing Gujarati ritual directions are seen in their original context. The oldest extant manuscripts with Gujarati ritual directions date from the 16th century and pertain thus to the second period in the manuscript transmission. The first period, 13th-14th centuries, has its focus on exegetical manuscripts. The second period, from the 15th to the 18th centuries, focuses on liturgical manuscripts. At this point, the Indian community is particularly concerned with the correct performance of the ceremonies, as shown by the Rivayat exchanges with the Iranian community. The third period, from the 18th century onwards, shows a resurrection of the interest for exegetical manuscripts. Hence, the manuscripts with Gujarati ritual directions appeared at a time when the community was preoccupied with this ritual performance. This explains the presence of more detailed ritual directions in the Indian manuscripts of that time. The work undertaken is only a preliminary study, as it is based on a small section of the Yasna. Based on the sample studied, Anklesarya's edition is a very useful introduction, and it provides the main vocabulary needed for reading the ritual directions in the manuscripts. The proximity established between the ritual directions as given by Anklesarya on the one hand and those in the manuscript on the other indicates that Anklesarya provides a faithful rendition of the Indian ritual practice from at least the 16th century onwards. A closer and more comprehensive study of the evolution of the ritual practice in India is desirable, and our work is only the first step into this direction. The current trend is to match the written testimony to the current practice, and this is how the interactive film developed by the Muya project has been designed. This project, based in London at SOAS and directed by Professor Almut Hintze, recorded the full Yasna ceremony preceded by the preparatory Paragnā in 2017 in Mumbai. The total length of the film is 5 hours, namely 1 hour for the Paragnā and 4 for the Yasna. Last year, Almut Hintze gave a lecture during which she provided many extracts from this film, and the lecture is available on the Pourdavoud Center website. On my side, I will focus on the website developed to host this film. Our aim was to make a bridge between the text and the performance. The first extract I will show contains the recitation of Yasna 8/4, which I chose to illustrate what we have seen together today during this lecture. The film can run from the beginning till the end, or a specific passage can be chosen as here. As we will see while watching, the subtitles appear below. The Avestan text in a simplified transcription, an English translation, and then, if available for the passage in question, the Gujarati Ritual Directions from Anklesarya, translated into English, and the Middle Persian Ritual Directions from Manuscript 5, also translated into English.
Hashem always namaste, Ustaz Ustam Mayadashai Vestai Hashem, Hashem always namaste, Ustaz Ustam Mayadashai Vestai Hashem. 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 Hashem always namaste, Ustaz Ustam Mayadashai Vestai Hashem.
The second extract shows the result of the work undertaken for the encyclopedia linked with the film. By clicking on pause, each object has a dot, and when selecting a dot, a frame surrounds the object. By doing so, on the right side panel, the information about the object is displayed. One or more pictures of the object, its name, and then a description of it, followed by the moments where the object is used. At the end, there are bibliographical references pertaining to the entry. It is also possible to go to any other entry within the encyclopedia by clicking on List of Entries at the very bottom. Some entries related with the current entry are also cross-referenced. It is also possible to click on any other object traced on the image to open the corresponding entry. The encyclopedia counts 60 entries, ranging from the assistant priest to the goat, the mortar, and the vase-like jug. Concerning the tracing, 50 objects have been traced during the 5 hours of the film, meaning you can stop the film at any moment and know what objects are currently there. Having explained why the Avesta should be re-edited and shown the importance of the ritual directions, I can now approach the short final part of my talk about the new editions of the Avesta. The multimedia Yasna or Muya project is based at SOAS in London and funded by the ERC. It is directed by Professor Almut Hintze. The project combines two different yet complementary approaches. One starts from the act of the ritual performance, the other from the manuscripts. We have already seen the result of the first approach with the interactive film. And now I will speak briefly about the edition undertaken. Muya aims at providing a new edition of the Yasna ceremony. Needless to say, such an enterprise requires time and technology. During the first phase of the project, the necessary technical tools have been developed by the team and its partners, and they are now fully functional. 30 manuscripts, chosen according to their type and date, have been transcribed using the OTE software, the offline transcription editor. By directly encoding the text in an XML format, it allows a simpler use of the data for the next steps. Once all the manuscripts have been transcribed and proofread, the collation properly can start. The collation process allows to establish the edited text and its variants by comparing the transcriptions of the 30 manuscripts. The slide shows a short unit of text in the collation tool. To ease the reading of the critical apparatus, a work of regularization has been undertaken. To do this, we defined orthographic, phonetic, or orthographic-phonetic rules. The most important criterion was that the rule should occur regularly and cannot be an isolated case. This process generated subreadings written here in gray. However, I must confess that even with rules, there always is some personal judgment involved. Once the collation is done, the information can be exported and used to produce the edition containing the edited text and its critical apparatus. All our transcriptions and our editions will be available in open access online. This is for sure a very short summary, as I do not want to bother the audience with details. For the one interested, the first volume of the Muya editions has recently been published. This edition covers chapters 3 to 8 of the Yasna and includes the Middle Persian ritual directions as they appear in manuscript 5. Furthermore, a whole chapter of 80 pages describes the editorial process, and another one of 65 pages deals with the ritual directions from 30 manuscripts for this section of the Yasna. Other books will be published in the future and will cover other sections of the Yasna. 0 to 2 by Almut Hintze, 9 to 11 by Merbod Ranizadeh, 28 to 30 by Benedict Peschel, 56 and 57 by Chiara Grassi, and 62 to 72 by Stefano Damanins. For sake of completeness, I should also mention the forthcoming publication on chapters 1 to 8 of the Sanskrit translation undertaken by Martina Palladino. By including this aspect within Muya, the project has for aim to render a full picture of a text in its written transmission. Working on this project allowed us to understand at which point all these data are linked and should be part of a collaborative work to progress in our understanding of the transmission and the meaning of the text. I have already mentioned another ambitious project that started in Berlin, the CAB, standing for Corpus Avesticum Berolinense, directed by Professor Alberto Cantera. It represents the first attempt to edit the entire Avestan Zoroastrian textual corpus within its ritual context, and to produce and offer both printed and digital editions of the text. A similar methodology is used, as they also transcribe manuscripts in XML and use a similar collation tool to produce the edition. Avestan studies are going in one unified direction, using the available technology to produce an accurate edition of the text which has been transmitted during so many centuries, and including the so important ritual aspect. There would be many other things to say, but due to time constraints, I could not mention here all the theories and scholars who have brilliantly contributed to this renewal. However, I hope I have been able to show you the current trends in Avestan studies and how much there is still to discover in this amazing field, even if the religion, the text, have existed for more than 3 millennia.